And I really like your point too. That I mean, if you look at DC, I mean, there's nothing country specific. It's a completely, absolutely rotted and corrupted system that is absolutely just washing in every type of influence money imaginable. And of course, we always say, I mean, you know, Google, Amazon, Koch brothers. I mean, these are infinitely more structural and dangerous than any foreign government. But you can add, of course, Russia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the Emirates. I mean, these are all places that, can just, and countless more, just endlessly wash the United States money. And of course, I didn't even mention, petro, arms, and pharma. But Djene, Actually, let's get to the Bolton book first. Then we'll get to Israel because you brought it up. So can we just kind of dispatch of Bolton first, though? I think it's important. And again, I don't care about people's personally or, whatever. It's not about a grudge at Bolton because he's a jerk. It's the fact that in the process of the resistance embracing these types, of course, they're showing they have no policy commitments, don't care about anything besides Trump, but that, we're really forgetting that this guy is absolutely one of the most, just mad and insane foreign policy. Really one of the great warmongers, bloodthirsty of our time. So we'll get to some of the things he said. I think, obviously the part about encouraging the treatment of the Uyghurs is particularly disturbing, but remind us who John Bolton is. And maybe also, I'll shut up in a second, but some of his complaints about Donald Trump are, there's the usual, he's disgusting and corrupt, which we all kind of know. But then there's there's other times where Trump seems pretty sympathetic. Like Trump is like, hey, just let me talk to the North Koreans or the Iranians. And Bolton's like, see, this guy's really a wuss, just like the foreign policy establishment. He doesn't want to, potentially murder millions over some horrifying foreign policy vision.
Well, Bolton, I don't know. I guess I'm getting old now, but Bolton was a big guy back in the days of the Bush administration and a controversial guy. He was appointed UN ambassador, and he made that famous comment about destroying one of the levels of the UN because he believed it's useless. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like that. He is definitely within this tradition, neoconservative tradition of foreign policy. He is a unilateralist. He does not have much time for multilateral behavior. He is a sort of very hawkish American imperialist in that context. He was he's been and he's has a fixation with overturning the Iranian regime. Now, I would note here, I have no fondness for the Iranian regime. They're a brutal, violent regime that engages in, repression at home, that murders, minority groups, Kurds, Azeris, women, and so on and so forth. But Bolton, he gets into bed with really nasty groups such as the Mujahideen Khalq, possibly the only worse administration for Iran at the moment than the mullahs would be the Mujahideen Khalq, which is a sort of a cult, a cult-like organization, which has its tendrils into all kinds of politics, which, cooperated with Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq war, and so on and so forth. And Bolton is, Bolton, and I, believe this is purely cynical, works with them because he believes them as a good sort of force that could be used to overturn the regime. So
lots of money though there too. Just related back earlier. They've paid Rudy Giuliani, Howard Dean, so there's a lot of money to be made as well.
There is a lot of money to be made. They operate in a very sophisticated way. The Mujahideen, they'll go around under fake names saying, "Hey, we're the Committee for Democracy in Iran. Do you like democracy in Iran?" And no one's going to say no to that. But then you have these cynical people who know who they are. John Bolton is not some sort of freshman who got duped into signing a petition of Maryam Rajavi as the sort of president-elect of Iran. He knows who these guys are. These guys are a vicious group, a terrorist organization, and a group that is deeply despised in Iran. Now, Bolton is, Bolton has this sort of pathological fixation with Iran. He sees Iran as this great threat. Now, Iran, a lot of Iran's foreign policy is certainly not great. They spend billions of dollars on foreign expeditions while their country is in dire economic straits. But bombing Iran is not going to solve the Iranian people's problems. Bombing Iran and invading Iran and overthrowing the regime through sort of an external intervention is going to be a lot worse than Iraq. We've seen how the United States, think of it this way. Many of the criticisms the neoconservatives used to put forward about Iraq and Iran, they're valid criticisms that these countries are authoritarian. But these people themselves, are you really going to trust them to implement democracy in these countries? It's like Imperial Japan used to criticize Western imperialism in, places like Indonesia and India, which is fair enough. But, Imperial Japan, when it turned up, didn't make the situation much better. So Bolton has this long history of hostility.
Well, and especially, the United States is the primary imperial actor in the world today. So, to say the least. And of course, the history of, you just cannot, discount the history of coup making on Iran and also the fact that definitely, in addition to the success of the Iranian nuclear deal, which no one disputes that Iran was observing, that after September 11th, the Khatami government absolutely through back channels was trying to normalize relations with the United States. So in all of these realist senses, there's just absolutely no leg for the U.S. to stand on, regardless of what, I think, of course, everybody agrees are Iranian human rights abuses and so forth.
But yeah, Bolton, though, Bolton was one of those officials who was pushing for escalation with the Iranian regime. And, if we remember last year, there was a war scare, over potential bombings, over drones and things like that. And
after they assassinated
Qasem. So this ongoing escalation,
right?
Bolton obviously thought that he could goad Trump into war. I think people like Bolton probably have the same perception of Trump as we do, where it's like, if I can get in a room with him and be the last person he talks to, I can get my objectives, because he is so sort of malleable in that sense. So, but Trump has these anti-war, anti-interventionist instincts at times. And, obviously that didn't work out for John Bolton either. And, if we read his book, probably there's a lot of valid criticisms and there certainly is, and he's exposing certain things, but he's salty. He's salty that he didn't get to ram through his neoconservative agenda, Iran and other countries around the world, which John Bolton wants to take a more militaristic and aggressive posture towards.
Well, I want to talk about the danger of that in a second, but in terms of sort of normalizing Bolton's foreign policy as, people who have zero discernment, only Trump fixation sort of embrace him. But regardless, before we get to that, what do you think are the most significant? Because even as John Bolton is a totally unreliable narrator in terms of, he makes, the book is also quite egotistical according to reports. And he's got this, just disgusting foreign policy. And, thank God he wasn't listened to on Iran and North Korea. But at the same time, his talking about how, corrupt and disgusting and self-indulgent Trump is. Of course, I believe every single word of that. So what do you think the most significant things that he's written about Trump are?
Well, I am looking forward to reading the book, although I kind of don't want to give John Bolton money for that book.
Yeah, please, God, don't buy this book, people.
Yeah, so
Jesus Christ, don't buy the book.
I'm going to have to find some other way to get access.
Yes.
But I think,
we'll get you a review copy, TMBS contributor, MR contributor, review copy.
Ultimately, I think the revelations that John Bolton has put forward about the corruption, about the relationship with Xi, about the discourse on, for example, the Uyghurs. Firstly, it shows the utter cynicism of the way that foreign policy has been made in the Trump administration. But ultimately, I don't think it's anything that we could not have surmised or that we could not have imagined. I mean, every single book that has come out about the Trump administration has basically confirmed what everyone's perceptions were and what what we would assume Trump would be doing, right? So it's interesting in that it kind of confirms things for us, but it's confirming things that we all probably would have assumed anyway. It's just actually seeing it and having someone who was a senior administration official confirming it sort of adds more weight to that kind of thing. And I think we'll see more and more of these kind of things coming out.
Can you talk about the Uyghur thing specifically, and maybe also maybe go back to the banking intervention, and maybe also basically telling Xi, like, hey, here's how you can help me get reelected.
Yeah, I mean, this is like something which is totally believable because you can imagine that Trump did this, right? Trump is not some kind of person who is a big fan of human rights and who's going to shed tears about oppression. Now, what we've seen in China is, and I think the reporting is pretty strong. I want to give a shout out to my former classmate from uni, Amy Chin, who writes for the New York Times and who's written about the Uyghurs. We've seen really brutal oppression of the Uyghur community. Now, this is within the context of, China attempting to consolidate power. It's a very similar dynamic to what's happening in Kashmir or what Turkey's been going on or what Israel's been doing within the context of sort of gaining greater control, consolidating central authority across the thing. And this has obviously led to the creation of, what seems to be concentration camps, but the Chinese...
Do we really, I agree with everything you're saying, and the reporting is, look, there's no doubt that there's significant rights abuses for sure of the Uyghur community. I guess I'm going to hesitate. I don't, I might want to have some precision about the use of that word, although it could be. I just think it's... Especially with, the trouble with China right now is that, it's 100%, again, the pioneering of abuses and surveillance systems, particularly in Tibet and the Uyghur region, are undeniable. And then at the same time, of course, this is the sort of tip of the sphere of a new sort of neocon, neoliberal aggression towards China. So that's the,
the term concentration camp is of course controversial,
but they could well be.
What is happening is there are significant numbers of Uyghurs who have been placed into, prisons and who are which are being re-education camps. Are there elements that want to exaggerate the brutality of this? Probably, but at the same time, the Chinese government is sort of attempting to frame job retraining program, right? So what we have is these significant human rights abuses, which elements of the right are using as a kind of discursive tool to say how evil the Chinese government is. Now, these same people don't say a word about Kashmir, which is also a pretty brutal case, but there is legitimate criticism. But again, as with many things on the political right, it's mobilized in an entirely cynical manner. But what we see is Trump actually has sympathy for this thing. No doubt, because Trump is thinking, I wouldn't mind being able to put a bunch of people in a prison camp without any...
Thinking of his own concentration camps. Yes.
Yeah, without due process. Trump has proven time and time again that he has this deep authoritarian instinct. And, so him praising Xi for this, it's he's basically telling the Chinese, all my anti-Chinese rhetoric is a big song and dance for the rubes, and I totally sympathize with you. Could you do me a favor and buy some more soybeans from swing states so that I can get my reelection? So, on one level, it shows the cynicism of Trump's foreign policy and Trump's anti-China rhetoric, in that, the guy really is just using this for domestic consumption. And secondly, it shows Trump once again, and I'm sure he doesn't do this consciously, is trying to get foreign powers to assist him in his election, right? Which is just, I can understand why people would freak out about that, but it's kind of obvious that that's going to happen. What do you expect? So it's really, again, it's just nothing we wouldn't have expected. Do we really think Trump is upset about Muslims getting put into prisons?
Yeah,
do you think he really cares a lot about what's going on in Hong Kong? No, not really. He's more interested about American domestic affairs. He's got whatever authoritarians do. The only value is that it might provide a propaganda victory for him. And American foreign policy has always been cynical, but this level of cynicism sort of really takes the varnish off it, and embarrasses sort of more traditional foreign policy types who at least type to keep up the pretense that there is some kind of guiding principle of human rights behind the American relationship with the rest of the world.
So do you think that this will have any political effect?
I mean, does anything have any political effect these days? I mean, American politics is, from my perspective, is so polarized. I mean, like, I live in a very Trump area of the country. And whatever happens, you have the Trump people who are not particularly switched on to politics. So they just like Trump because Trump's Trump. And then you have the more intellectual conservatives who will rationalize anything. For example, the evangelicals, everything is viewed through the lens of whether they're going to get abortion outlawed or not. Right. So, it's really irrelevant to them whether Trump does this or whether Trump does that, because they will always, increasingly you find that the justifications they make are negative, saying that the Democrats are bad rather than Trump being good. But, is this going to change minds? No, what's going to happen is Bolton's going to be canceled by the right. That's what he's going to be. He's going to be canceled by the right, and he's
not going to get to. I mean, but he'll have his day on CNN and MSNBC, which is just pathetic and expected. But yes, he's not going to be on Fox.
He's going to be a Morning Joe regular.
Right? Absolutely. He'll be a Morning Joe regular. All right.